How do you want to start this week?
Well, originally when we went to go film this Friday, I was wearing summer clothes
Oh man.
because I was. We should have filmed this in July and we didn't.
Wait, you were going to
I thought
tell.
I would pretend and I would talk about like, hey, I'm gonna have a lot of hot dogs on the 4th of July.
Oh man, you can't go. You can't lie to the audience like that,
But
man.
that
That's
was
an
that was
untruth.
but that's why I changed it because I realized that these are all about us trying to be really straightforward and honest. And
Yeah,
so starting
transparent.
off on a lie, I mean,
Yeah, this isn't representative democracy. We don't lie
yeah.
about what we're doing here. We're here to tell people how the game works and why we think what we're doing is cool. Um, and I think that starts with design pillars, right? Like studio pillars, really more than design pillars. Uh,
Well, design pillars though, I think is a way to think about it because just to jump in, one of the things I've noticed a lot when I talk with the younger developers is the confusion between tools and goals. And so a tool will be like, man, I love Houdini. I can make such cool stuff.
mhm.
Okay, that's cool, but what are you making? What is the goal of what you're making? What game are you making? Does it really lend itself to helping you express that? Um,
We got that in
you know,
makers stuff too. Like people would be like, "Man, I got an awesome drill press." I was like, "What are you using the drill press for?" And they're like,
yep,
"I'm going to make holes and stuff." I don't know.
yeah. Where the goal is like, hey, we want to make a great game. How do we make that great game? What's important to make sure that the decisions you're making as you're making the game, you're making for that. And it's also then lets you get rid of that cruft. I mean, I remember early on when I started making websites, I would get these nasty emails of like, oh my God, you have so many errors, like this HTML4 error you have. Like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. There's
Does
a
it
whole
work
bunch
right?
of
And
stuff that
yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah. It's. I mean, and that focus, like, that gives you a really good lens through which to look at the work, right? Like,
Yes.
at the end of the day, like we sit down, we do play test every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we break off into groups of four. Sometimes a few more if people come in late and just want to watch it or whatever. And then after that, we go into a meeting where we all sit down and we talk about the things that we knew we were testing in that game. And then also we talk about the things that just kind of pop up. And the lens through which we look at the things that pop up is this going to be a good experience for somebody who's played a bunch? Is this going to be a good experience for a new user? Like, is this what we're trying? Is this does this
Yes.
fulfill the goal that we're trying to create in this game? And it's a really constructive way to think about this project that like 20 people are working, 25 people are working on now.
The one really brain breaking thing now that we were just talking about, and we'll have a whole episode on this, but just the game plays differently for everybody. Not just in like, hey, this is intense here or not intense here, but literally a newbie could have had a good game today who had never played the game before. And their challenge would have been way different than my challenge, who I've played a bunch. And so we've got a bunch of double specials, or we got three goopers at one time, which is just chaos. We were able to make it through because we were better and the game understood that and could express that to us. And so now all of a sudden when we give that feedback, it's always like, well, hang on, now we got to parse it through this of like, is this somebody on this team who maybe wasn't capable of handling that situation, which we have to account for. And we always have to think mixed skill sets. But yeah, it just makes us really bring. Okay, this was really fun for me. Now let's play test it with outside play testers because that'll be the kind of the edge that'll say was this really successful or not.
Well, and also, so the other thing I was just talking right before we started this, so it's really hard playtesting a game that's non-deterministic, right? Like if you're playing Quake 1, the same enemies spawn in the same place every single time you play on the same difficulty level, and like you, if there's a bug one time, the same bug is going to be there the next 50 times. With this, like it's hard to tell which events are the driver. Like we had three grabbers spawn in the park today. And is that a fault of the driver saying, "Hey, we think that we can handle it"? Is it a bug, or is it the driver saying, "These people are really, I don't know what else to throw. I'm
Yeah,
throwing my arms up in the air and I don't know what to do next." So like we also have to do things like test with people who've played once before. We're bringing a group back that we tested with a couple months ago to put them through the ringer again and see what their experience is this time. And I'm super
and
curious because
it's
the last time they got beat to death. Like they had a really hard game because we had some bugs, and so I'm curious to see what they come in, what knowledge their pre knowledge about how the game works does to their experience this go around.
they also came in when like typically when you do skill levels, you have like a regular skill level and a hard skill level, let's say. And that's the same for everybody. It doesn't adapt. And that's what they faced. And so they found us trying to find the right one. And the breakthrough really was Amy creating the adaptive skill level, where it's about intensity and not difficulty, which we're going to see was one of the pillars. So that's why she knew to go tackle that.
Exactly. Exactly. So, okay, should we run down the pillars? Is that where to start, I guess?
Probably it's like a helpful exercise. So, like, context for this is when we first start the studio and first decide what we're working on, I had come with some, and then Kim and I together created this list, and then came to everybody else and said, this is what we're making. These are something that don't actually change very much during the making of the game if you're doing it right. Now, you may find out something like, oh my God, this is really horrible. Like, this doesn't work at all. We should think of something else. But really, it starts with, these are what we're making. Are you buying into that? Is it going to go? And then these have stayed the test of time.
So the core tenets that are written on our wiki that were published in 20, the last updated about a year and a half ago, a little bit.
We actually printed. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go
Here
ahead.
at the studio, we actually have these printed out on boards because we wanted them always in everybody's heads as they were thinking about
What
day.
font did you do? Comic Sans on that, or?
We they're like, so there's the studio goals kind of in the game goals, and they got switched, and one got bigger, and one was supposed to be the smaller one, and the smaller one, like, so we have a lot of them.
Okay.
It's a lot of
Okay.
them. If they have cats on them too.
We don't have the little things like how you can be a better programmer above the urinals and in the backs of the toilet doors when we go in, though, right?
Or have you ever been to Google where they
Oh
have
yeah.
like that whole crazy sheet you're supposed to read?
Yep.
Like, how long are you standing here, man? Because that's like a 30-minute read for me.
Yeah, it's like it's 23 seconds is the average mammal's time to avoid their bladder. Anyway, um, okay, so the core tenets are
That's a good.
it
That's a good
scales from a kangaroo rat up to a blue whale, same 23 seconds. So think about that. The core tenets, games replayable. We
Yes.
keep players
So-
working. Oh, well, we can talk. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but so like that is such the core that the game's replayable, that we can create one piece of content that'll be played again and again and again and again and again and again. Like, that is really a core tenet of to how we approach this.
And so replayable in this case doesn't mean like a roguelike or something like that necessarily, where you're going through and doing the same thing, and like the idea is that your brain gets something novel and new about each game loop, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah, and so one of the things like you'll often see is this is tackled by procedural generation of levels, but that breaks some of the other tenets you'll see, and that's why we didn't do that. And so instead, the levels stay the same, but the gameplay on top of it changes, and what the tools you have change. Or I think like in Left 4 Dead in particular, probably the tools you had did not change so radically, and the gameplay did change, but probably not as much as it does here.
Keep players working together. So this is one of my favorite ones, because this is kind of hard to wrap your head around when you're used to playing. Like, if I come from battle royales, and there's a little bit of competition amongst your team to get the loot that you want, and that's antithetical to like the idea that players should always be working together.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of so like PUBG does a great job, I think, if you actually do work together in a common goal. But a lot of co-op games are really, you're just playing the same game at the same time. You're not really covering or helping each other. Where this, we want to make sure that you are, and you're doing it together, and that you're not having adverse goals.
And so, like an example of that, we've talked about this with the Matter compilers a lot, but the Matter compilers are good, like concrete explanation of how this works in practice, which is that literally, when you added the perk system, right? You told me the story. You added the perk system, and then they just spawned as drops in the world, and you'd be running along. I'll be like, oh hey, here's something that makes my shotgun better. That's awesome. But then what happened was the person who was out in front, if they were a loot goblin, they would kind of suck up all of the perks, and then the person who was at the end of the pack maybe
Yes.
wouldn't get anything, right?
Yes. This is why it's good to have a diverse set of people playing. So we can name the loot goblin Ryan. Ryan would run ahead and grab everything. And so now he can't do that. He finds the meta compiler first, and he's excited and shares it with the team.
Well, and then everybody drops one perk for everybody, and everybody gets
Yes.
to get, yeah, exactly. It works out. Um, faster shared experiences and foster shared experiences is spectacle. This is a good one. Like this is like you want people to finish the round of the game and feel like, oh god, I got to tell somebody what just happened because that was freaking awesome. And I feel like when this hits for us, it hits really well. It's I think it's a place where there's like infinite ceiling for improvement, though, right?
Yeah, always. Well, so and there's two parts to this kind of right. Is one is your four players, since you're playing together, you're actually close to each other and seeing the same thing. So I think I always call back to this one with you, where you're being chased, you're low in health, and I throw a stasis grenade that traps the brute just as he's about to hit you, and you're able to escape. Like that's a great moment together. We're going to talk about that, right?
Hmm.
But it's also is the spectacle part of it. Of should a gun be like super cool AK-47 feels real, or should it shoot crazy stuff out of it that's just cool to see? Right. And this is why we have two VFX people and also outsource some VFX because like it's just be crazy spectacle. Like you should see stuff that you're just like, oh, cool.
Well, and I mean that ties into that. Like, I assume that's why you chose one of the reasons you chose the setting for the game, right? Because like 60s sci-fi has a lot of like the VFX for 60s sci-fi
Yes.
was like some poor person who had to paint over each line of the master. I assume. I don't know. I don't even know
Yeah,
how
yeah.
they
It's
did that
it's
stuff.
it's the practical, the right.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't do it on a green screen. They actually had to do it, and so that means things are chunkier because you have to be visual different. And yeah, there's a bunch of things that rain down from there. But it is why sci-fi. Sci-fi also affects why like we want to be sci-fi for the weapons and all of that, right? Because it just lets you do things that on Earth just gets weird. Though I mean, you can always just let's be honest, you can always just throw out the reality to anything when you're making it. But I find it helps to have this consideration and this kind of world where you kind of know this set of rules inside of here because then when you see something it just feels better, it feels more solid.
Yeah. And like honestly, I've played so many games where I shoot the AK. Like I'm excited about having just like a ray gun. Like I want to pew and have the beam shoot across the screen. And like that stuff feels really good.
Guess who had a laser rifle in the finale today?
Oh, really? How many
Yes,
people did you burn to death?
yes, I saw some fires.
Okay. I look. I did. I I had a moment today where somebody was gooed and they were too far away from me. I was like, I have incendiary grenades. I can solve this problem.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyway.
Jeff had the perk for grenades and had goo grenades.
Oh, so he had like 15 million goo grenades. They're real
It
good
was
in the
good.
holdouts. Like,
It was good.
yeah, just
Yeah.
just chucking them down and slowing. Like you make it a nice big clump of bad guys there, so you can let loose with the blaster. Okay, so close skill gaps and power gaps is another one of the big ones. So you touched on this a little bit ago, but
Yeah, so one of the ways we do this is so we always wanted the game to be playable for mixed skill sets, is kind of how we say it. And that is meaning like you don't need to be the super hardcore shooter. If you've played any first person or third person shooter, we want you to be able to jump in and be productive. So you have the common you can kill really easily, right? And that feels good. There's roles that you can have as you're getting up. Like you may not be the one who takes care of the brute, but you can help the people around that who are. And so we always want to make sure that's happening and they have that ability. But now that we have the adaptive kind of intensity, that really comes into play that the underlying driver is actually having that happen as well. And it's like, it's that classic of it's got a really low skill floor and really high skill ceiling.
well,
So there's a lot of room.
and there's other stuff that feeds into this too. Like this morning somebody pointed out that they had one of the perks that does like chain lightning on crits on headshots, and that completely evened their feeling of their ability to kind of contribute to the
Yep.
team, even though they were in with like two or three really competent alien shooters. So it's all about it's it's less about like the number of aliens you kill, and to that point, like we don't even show that, right? Like it's not a number we show at the end of the game. We highlight different things that people have contributed, and it feels more inclusive, which is the final of the core tenets for the studio: the inclusive and diverse at our core. Which like you hit it. Like if we didn't have loot goblins playing with us, how would we know how to design the game that doesn't that
Yep.
doesn't isn't affected by loot goblins?
But it's also trying to make the makeup of the team be diverse as well so that we get a lot of different feedback of just not player types, but people of we had some concepts that we were working on and some people of Asian descent were like, oh, this pose is actually something we shouldn't use because it's actually derogatory towards women. And like the concept artist who made it had no idea, right? And so having that kind of diversity on the team helps that as well. And it just pulls from different cultures so that you bring that into the game. I mean, our characters themselves are a mix of cultures, and the cultures that they're a mix of are actually spacefaring culture. So we have Russian, we have Chinese, we have American, and Indian, and those are really pulled from people um, of the world of space, right? And so, kind of really wanting to kind of lean into that of like, who's an interesting character to look at, who's somebody interesting to look at in space, and let's put them in the game.
Well,
Even though clearly we're way far in the future, still in the 60s and 50s and 70s, there were a lot of interesting people in space,
well,
or actually in 80s as well.
it all comes back around, right? Like
Yep.
this is one of the things I like is the idea that if humanity's reaching out to the stars, there's a diaspora, and anytime that happens, then all of your preconceived 20th century notions you should just chuck because
Yes.
things
Well,
are
and
different in space. It turns out.
we do the one little cheat of people. Some people do have a little bit of accents. In reality, if you're all mashed together on a ship over time, you're going to have a kind of common accent lend to itself. But that's going to get boring, and they're all just going to sound the same.
Well,
Where you really want to be able to have voices, be able to pick up out of the noise and stuff.
but
So
I
that's the
also
fun.
assumed that our characters came from different ships. So
Yes.
I assume each ship has its own accent. If some of these are going for hundreds of years, it's.
Well, Lance and Nessa came from the same ship,
Okay.
but their ship was one of the faster, newer ships, so it traveled less in space. So they've been together less.
It's a real Douglas Adams kind of vibe there. Um, do we want to talk about design pillars? I feel like we've
Yeah.
gone okay.
Great.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, some of these are the same. Obviously, games are highly replayable. Games about players working together. Our games feature easy engagement. This is one we haven't really talked about yet, but it's. I mean, it makes sense. It's pick up and play. If you know how to play a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter, you should be able to fire up the game and be relatively competent within the first several moments, right?
Sure, but this is a classic pillar that sounds really simple at first, but actually hits a bunch of different points. So there's the, hey, if my friend invites me to play, I can jump in and play. But that also means then that you can't have characters that level up, so that you're level 80 and your friend is brand new to the game, and you're like, I love this game, play with me, and go level up the first 30 levels, and then we can join into the same play space. We're like, no, you should always be able to do that. You level up in different ways versus your character, because it's about hanging out with your friends. And so if somebody hasn't been playing for a while and they join in, they should be able to jump in and play. And then also, it's our game instructor system that kind of teaches you the game as you play, and it points out things if you haven't been doing them, how to do them right in the middle of play, instead of, it's that other thing of like, hey, before you join me, go do this tutorial that you're going to forget everything it teaches you by the
Oh.
time you get into the real game.
Yeah, I love it when it's like time to get on the game with my friends and I fire it up and it's like, hey, you have a quick tutorial. 20 minutes later, you'll be in the game. I'm like, well, there goes a third of my session for tonight. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's on our Discord. When we jump into a new game that has a tutorial, the first person to go through it always yells out of like, don't need to do it. It's just, W forward,
Press C
shift
to
run.
crouch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Um, let's see. We talked about creating awesome and surprising moments. Uh, we didn't we talked a little bit about this, but there's a thing that's important about difficulty and shared moments where the tenet is specifically our games aren't about the difficulty but about a shared experience, and that's one that's tricky, especially when we're trying to set up a game that works with mixed groups and all sorts of other things. Is like when I play a game like this, I do want to have a difficult experience. Whereas when another player plays, they might want to just kind of chill back and click on some heads and have a hangout time with their friends.
yeah. I mean, so that comes down to how we think about what skill level is in general. And also, like, I think we've decided that we're probably going to ship with something like, here's the game, and then here's the social version of the game, which I don't want to say those words social because they're both social, but like the more laid back, because it's like the game itself now adapts to you and it does this really good thing. Um,
I mean,
because you need to have some challenge, like that's kind of the thing, that's the shared experience you have, that you overcome something that you didn't think. And it's like, especially when you're the last person standing and you save the whole team, those are awesome moments. But equally, it's just not that super punishing, like, hey, you're just going to hate this game for the first 20 hours you play it, but then it gets good. Like, no, it should be good at the beginning, and it should adapt up and get better with you and keep you challenged.
the you gave an example, like the counter to this is the Left 4 Dead 1 experience where like the I remember the first time I played No Mercy, it was maybe the most difficult multiplayer game. I'd never really played a co-op game that wasn't like an MMO or something like that that required actual Twitch skills. And it took us multiple nights to get through the end of No Mercy. And when we finished No Mercy, it was like high fives all around. It was a big accomplishment. And then 3 months later, we were mowing through it in about 45 minutes. Like it was no problem. And the thing I never realized, but you told me a few weeks ago, is
The game did not change. What changed was people learned how to play it.
yeah.
They learned how to adapt and work together, and that was really fun to watch.
So okay, so everyone feels part of the team. This is another part of the mixing different skill levels where we give every player actionable things that they can do that let them contribute to the overall experience.
Yeah, because it's also about like not having these hardcore roles, but allowing those roles to flow and happen at the time, so that you could be the hero tank at the right moment. Like you're the last one standing, and you're going to mow everything down and get everybody back up, or you can be the person who's doling out health kits, or there's a lot of just different roles that you can have, and depending on what weapons you get, what perks you get, what grenades you have, will kind of really vary that.
Friends can always play together. This is my favorite one because playing a lot of multiplayer games with friends, when you sign up for a game that's a UB game, you have to have a Uplay account. When you sign up for an EA one, you have to have an Origin account. When you sign up for a Microsoft one, you got to have an Xbox Live account. It's a hassle. Like I have 18 different friends listed at a given moment, and it stinks.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So they should always be able to jump in, join that game. So we do a lot of times with matching codes is probably the easiest way, though you can use your friends list if you're on that same platform. But it's also about as we think about like mods and how we handle that. Let's say that you get a new set of maps. Your friends shouldn't have to worry about that. That should come along with that. And so that's how we talk about like promoting content to our dedicated servers so that everyone can download it. If let's say one modder decides I want to charge $1 for my map, um, only one person needs to buy it. Everyone else will be able to download that, right? And be able to have that. So you can always just jump in. There's no blocker for you having that fun.
It's kind of like buying a round at a bar, right?
So that is exactly the metaphor we originally started with. If nobody minds buying that first round because you're like, well, if someone's going to buy the next round, I'll be good. Like I'll make my money back.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Um, Forming plans. Players can form plans together. This one's great because like a lot of games like this, you'll go through and it's just like a mad dash from start to finish where you just shoot anything that moves. It's not one of your three teammates, and then you get to the end, you're like, well, what just happened? I don't have any idea what I've done here.
Well, so this is one of the reasons why I actually wanted to go through this list, because going back to the original part about why we don't have procedural maps, this is one of the reasons why. It's really hard to form plans when you don't know what's coming up. But in our maps that hey, there's going to be this disco event once we get through this. So I'm actually going to hold this because I want to use this at that event versus I should just be using stuff. That said, we also try to balance it where you're picking up a lot of special stuff. So like grenades are often very scarce in other games. We just flood you with grenades because we want you to use them. We want you to throw them. And so I think the first playtest will still see people kind of hoarding them. But by the second playtest, we see people just being really loose with them because they realize, oh, there's more coming. So I can just throw them. I could just use them. And that's the fun part.
It's funny. I've noticed like the last couple of weeks I've been making a concerted effort during playtests to just constantly be throwing grenades. So much more fun. Like
Yes.
lighting stuff on fire, making goo everywhere, like whatever it is, it's good to use the powers that we give you.
The only scary thing is sometimes you have in your head, like, oh, this is a stasis grenade and this will save this day. Oh, no, that was an incendiary
Yeah, see,
grenade.
that's a good excuse when you light me on fire, Chad. Um, so that's the long term goals. You're like we the next tenet is players have long term goals, which is like there's a the holdouts give you an opportunity, a play space where you can use all the cool trap items and some of the more defensive oriented things like the goo grenades and the turrets. And the long term goals let you know, hey, we're getting ready to come up to one of these. I should pick up this turret now, and I'm gonna not maybe pick up the
Exactly.
flame sword.
Well, but also taking that even further, then that's why we have a meta game, and that's why we talk about things like the season pass and things like that. So often, I think people think of season passes as monetization, but for us, it's really about engagement. It kind of gives you goals to shoot for and things to try, so that you can then earn things in the game, and that's really how we think of that whole thing. So there's the version that, like, if you buy the game, you're just going to get the season pass with it and you go through it. It has nothing to do with us trying to monetize you. It's just about that engagement. And so that came out of this, of like, what are the longer term goals? What are you coming back for? What are you hoping to earn through play that will change your game next time?
So we recognize that trust between players grows over time.
So this is one of those things that doesn't seem apparent, but there's a really good talk. I'm not going to remember who gave this talk right now, and I'm going to feel horrible about it, but it's about co-op and trust. and it's high risk events. So like if you had the very first thing as you start the game is you have someone manning a sniper gun and other people running through cover, and that person messes up with the sniper gun, you're like, screw that guy, let's kick him. And so instead, what we try to do is we try to have things like the park can be in our game in episode one. The park is this kind of hard place where chaos can just happen, and if we would put that in the very beginning of the game, I think we would have people run off and leave people behind and just not know how to handle it. Where we put that towards the end of the game so that they've learned to work together as a team and understand, oh, hey, Will's going to be hanging out a little bit behind. I got to make sure he moves with us. If he doesn't, or Ryan, who runs always ahead, is all of a sudden way behind. He must be in trouble. I should go help him. And so we try to make sure that we introduce the team to each other. So especially like if you're playing with anonymous people, like first time people you've ever played with, you kind of get to learn together how to work together as a team before we throw some of these challenges at you.
Well, and we expand upon that in some of the future episodes with some. I don't want to describe them because we haven't really shown them yet, but there are some encounters that require a high amount of trust, and there's massive potential for failure that I think are really fun.
Yes.
And then the last one, there's two more. One of them is that we create opportunity for players, not work, which is like I think this is an important. This is a thing I didn't really understand before we sat down and started talking about this a couple of weeks ago when I wrote the first blog post. But the idea that when you do something that feels meaningful and impactful in a game, it's satisfying and fun. And when you do something that feels like busy work, you just come out kind of slightly more depressed maybe than you were when you started. Is an important thing to do when you're giving players tasks, when you're telling them stuff to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, this door is going to open when you press this button, and the thing you're going to do here then is defend and figure out how to handle this, which is way more fun than, hey, there's 6 keys hidden about, and every time you hit this point, you have to go find these 6 keys, and it's always going to be the last place that you go look because we want to like that just becomes work, and you're like, oh, I should just go do some Excel spreadsheets at this point.
Click those cookies, Chet. Click those cookies. Um, and then the last one is we prioritize diversity and inclusion, which we talked about again. But
Yep.
that also means that we reduce the impact of a disruptive player's ability to hose everybody else's game that they're playing with.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's an interesting balance because we are also a game like the end point of this is to do something that a lot of other shooters do and just turn off team damage entirely. But we don't actually do that in the Anacrusis.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we don't turn off friendly fire is when you do that, the other players become just machines and bots and not real people, and you don't care about them. You don't do the, oh shit, sorry, I didn't mean to throw that. Like you want to have those moments. Those are actually valuable moments that kind of attach you to your team as much as the successful ones. So you definitely want to make sure that you carry that through still. But it is, um, you know, the thing we have going for us is 4 players is a small group. So your surface area of exposure for trouble is pretty small. You tend to be able to find out really quickly how it's going. We give you tools to deal with that if it's not going well. I think my favorite description of Left 4 Dead ever was it's my favorite co-op game ever when playing with friends, and probably what the real zombie apocalypse would be like with complete strangers. And I like to think that we pull that off in the Anacrusis as well. That it is pretty chaos when you watch people first start working together and it going chaotically, and they're just throwing things and it's mayhem. And then by the end of the game, I think we've gotten better at teaching people how to work together and kind of pull together and focus. And it's a lot of those little things. It's there's a concept of meta, not like meta and meta progression, but meta and like, wake up every morning and say something positive. And if you do that enough times, you'll start thinking positively. And we give you just a lot of little things in the world that make you care about your teammates or make you work together or make you yell, meta compiler here, and make everybody happy. And you're like, I want to make those people happy again. And so it's often you see in games, it's not one thing. There's not like one thing that brings you together by the end. It's all these little things that we do and tie them together. And that's one of those things that we think about when we're designing and creating this space of like, how do we give these little things?
It's really fun. There's a moment we do observe playtests kind of all the time now, where you'll sit down with. Sometimes we bring in a group of people that play together often. Sometimes we bring in people who've played before. Sometimes we bring in 4 people off the Discord who've never played a game together in their life. And watching the groups of 4 that haven't played together, like usually there's like a period during the first level where they're it's like kind of like full grab ass, here's how cool I am. And
Yeah.
then like the second level is kind of figuring out what roles everybody's going to slot into, not like assigned roles, but just kind of somebody will be out front, somebody will be in the back. And then by the third level, they get like halfway through, and then all of a sudden the switch turns and it's like, hey, there's over on the left side, shoot, 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 I'm grabbed, help me. And like they get a real rhythm. And it's happened with almost all of the random groups that we put together so far, which is, it's really gratifying to see. It's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. That is one of my favorite parts of this.
So I mean, that's it. Those are the pillars. Those are the lens and the filters through which we view everything that goes into the game. It's the thing that informs a lot of our decisions.
Yep. And if you notice, on there was not do things in order. So doing the first blog post as a video post, the second one, totally okay.
Well,
we're not violating a pillar with that.
No, well, and also I mean, these aren't hard and fast rules, right? I mean, they are in that we've based the entire game on them, but there are things in the game that don't follow the rules.
Or I like to think of it that we purposely said we don't create like super detailed rules of like every clip size should be 30 bullets. Instead, you do something at a higher level so that it can be interpreted in the spirit of it taken forward. So it's a little bit, like occasionally we got to call the Supreme Court of the Anacrusis together and make some final decisions. But in general, like you understand like the spirit of what is being said here, and you don't do something that's antithetical to it.
I think that's the right way to put it. And that seems like as good a place as any to wrap it up. If you enjoy these, head over to the Steam page, which will be linked down below on the YouTube video or someplace on the Steam page. And you can hit the wishlist button. You'll get a notification first thing when these posts go up. Also, you can join our Discord at discord.gg/straybombay, and there's an announcements channel in there where stuff is posted as soon as it goes up as well. And it's a good place to leave comments about these posts. If you have ideas for future posts you'd like to hear us talk about, that's a great place to put them as well. There's a dev blog suggestion channel in there that's just for that. And you can sign up for playtests. There's some instructions that you'll see when you first join the Discord, or learn how to be a modder if you've made mods before and would like to talk to us about making mods for the Anacrusis. We're kind of we're getting to the point very soon. We're going to start expanding that pool, and would love to have more folks in that we can talk to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you stop by the Discord, you can also jump into playtests. So we've been pulling from there randomly. I think we're going to pull from there once some changes get put in this week.
We had some server changes that happened last week that kind of stalled us a little bit, but we'll have more. I was talking to Amy just before this, and we're working to catch up very soon.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Yeah, and also if you go to the Steam page, there are the written version of this where we kind of cover it in a little bit differently, but hopefully these blog posts or these videos are kind of capturing how we have those discussions, and I think probably come in a little easier to digest format.
I mean, the good news is I'm gonna have the blog post for this video done immediately, so really excited about that. We will see you all next time. Thanks for coming by, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.